Operators allow you to manipulate values. We've already used a few operators. However, there are over 30 operators in the JavaScript language. We're going to take a look at a few more operators in this movie. First, let's review the operators we have already been introduced to. So the assignment operator is the equal sign. It puts a value into a variable. That's how we've used the assignment operator up to this point. Also, the addition or concatenation operator, that's the plus symbol, adding numbers or concatenating strings. Subtraction operator, the division operator, and the multiplication operator. Those are the operators we've looked at thus far. Let's add a few new operators. First, we're going to look at the increment and the decrement operator. Now, these two operators are mainly used within loops, and so once we cover loops, we'll be using these in more detail, but I want to introduce what they do. So increment basically increases the value of a variable by 1. Decrement decreases the value by 1. So let me open up JavaScript console. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. And then let's create a variable. Variable I, we're going to set it equal to 1. So there I is equal to 1. Now if we use the increment operator, it returns the value of 1. However, the way the console is working here is it returns the value of 1, then it increments it. So if I enter 1 again, we see that the actual value is now 2. Alright, you can place the increment operator before the variable as well. And notice how this works. Now it increments it first, and then it displays the value. Decrement works just the opposite. So if I go minus minus, I minus minus, it prints 3, but I is actually now 2 because it printed the variable and then it decremented it. It reduced it by 1. So that's how the increment and decrement operators work. Next one is modulo. Now modulo returns the remainder. And so this is used just like the division operator. However, instead of getting the quotient of one number divided by another, you get the remainder of those two. Let's take a look at that. Now, one quick note on the console here. As we go through different lessons, I'll introduce different things about the console. Notice that I had closed the console, I opened it again, but I is still declared. The console will retain those values which we've entered, the variables and other things which we've entered, until I refresh the HTML page which I am accessing the console from. So just a concept to be aware of. Now let's take a look at modulo. So let's do 100 modulo 6. And that leaves a remainder of 4. So 100 divided by 6 is actually 16 with a remainder of 4. Now let's try 100 modulo I. Remember, we just took a look at I and it was equal to 2. Notice the remainder is 0. 100 divided by 2 is 50, and so there is no remainder. The modulo operator, you may wonder, well, when would you use this type of thing? Well, there's certain situations where the modulo operator can be very effective in helping you solve a problem. For example, if you wanted to find out if a number was even or odd, you would divide it by 2. There would be a remainder if it were odd. There wouldn't be if it were even. All right, let's take a look at the type of operator. The type of operator is actually the word type of, and it is used to determine the type of a variable. Open the JavaScript console again. I should still be in here. So type of I is a number. Let's create a string. Type of str That indicates it's a string. Whoops. I'm going to create a Boolean now. Type of, and that comes back as Boolean. Okay. So let's say we just declare a variable. We haven't assigned any value to it, so it should be undefined. Type of returns undefined. So as you can see, the type of operator allows you to check variables to see what data type they contain, and that can be helpful in certain situations as well. The next set of operators we want to look at are equality operators. So to check equality, you use two equal signs. Strict equality, three equal signs. Now, why are there two separate operators for checking equality? Well, it just happens to be the way it is in JavaScript. Now, usually you should use the strict equality operator, as it is more accurate than the equality operator. A lot of people that learn JavaScript casually end up using the double equal, just the equality, and sometimes it can lead to problems. So usually you should use strict equality. Now, the purpose of the equality operator is determine whether one value equals another value. For example, you have a couple variables to determine whether they are equal to each other. So let's take a look at an example of that. Before we do that, I just want to indicate inequality. So if you want to check to see if they're not equal to each other, we have an inequality operator and a strict inequality operator. Okay, let's take a look at these operators. Let's declare a variable, str equal to Steve. Let's declare another variable. Let's make it equal, whoops, got to give it a different name. And now let's see if they're equal to each other. Notice I use the equality operator, and that comes back true. If I use the strict equality operator, that comes back true as well. Okay, so in this type of situation, you get the same results whether you're using equality or strict equality, and the same is true for inequality. Comes back false. They are equal to each other, so it should indicate false if we're checking to see if they're not equal to each other. And the same would be true for strict inequality. So what is the difference? Well, let me give you an example. Declare another variable and set it equal to 5. Declare one more variable and set that equal to 5 in quotes. So it's actually a string. Now let's see if num is equal to num1. It indicates they are equal to each other. This happens in JavaScript because of something we call type coercion, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Basically what is happening is coercing the types so that they match, and so it determines that they're equal. So the way to determine that these two values really are not equal, one's a string, one's a number, so technically they're not equal, would be to use the strict inequality. As you can see, that comes back false. Okay, the inequality operators would work very similar. The equality operators we'll be using a lot more once we get into if statements and loops and control structures like that. But I wanted to introduce it to you, and specifically introduce you the idea of equality versus strict equality and inequality versus strict inequality, and encourage you to use, in almost all circumstances, you're going to want to use the strict equality or strict inequality operator. So basically the rule is, unless you have a reason otherwise, use the strict operator. All right, let's move on to the next topic.